This is the You, Me, and BTC podcast.
Cryptocurrency decrypted.
Welcome to episode 77. First up this week, we're chatting with Joe Lee, the CEO of BTC.sx and Magnr. The latter is a brand new service that launched this week. It allows you to earn interest on your Bitcoin, just like you would with a traditional savings account. Mr. Lee will explain where the interest comes from, how the money is handled, and much more. Then later in the show, John and I will discuss how we feel about the state using blockchain technology. Some have pointed out that Edward Snowden's infamous leaks could have been prevented if the government kept access logs on a blockchain. Such technology is already under development, and we'll try to figure out how we can overcome the state's advancements. Your hosts today are Tim Baker, John Stuart, and myself, Daniel Brown. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is the You, Me, and BTC podcast. Glad to have you on another Thursday. I don't know, it could be a Friday or a Saturday or whenever the heck you listen, because this is a podcast. I am Daniel Brown, and I'm here with
Tim Baker.
We also have a really special guest today, the CEO of BTC.sx and also the creator of this new product that we're going to talk about today, Magnr. This is Mr. Joe Lee. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me on the show. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to hear all about this stuff. So I guess before we get into the new stuff, I guess I'll ask you to start with BTC.sx. If you could just tell us what it is, when it started, why you started it, just a little bit of the background and you know, how you got into all of this.
Sure. Yes, that's always a good place to start, when I first found out about Bitcoin, because I guess it just sets up the fascination that everybody seems to come across when they first discover the product. So I was working in banking and finance for the last 7 or so years. And in that time, I'd worked in various IT roles across different countries. Actually, I started my career at a graduate role at Barclays Bank in London's Canary Wharf. And that was very much at a time where, the banking industry was kind of where it was all at. You get a job in banking and you're told, this is a job for life. This is a great career prospects. This was slightly before the credit crunch or the global financial crisis. And during that time, I was very, very excited to be working in the banking industry. And coming from an IT side, I got quite a lot of exposure in, how banks work and how the architecture is set up there. And then after 3 years work experience, I decided to leave and go traveling. This was during a time that the economy was taking a slight bit of a downturn. And so I thought to myself, what do I really want to do in life? And, one of the answers at that point in time was to travel. When I was in Australia, I actually got offered a job in investment banking, a bank called Macquarie Group. During that time, I got talking to everybody within the organization, as many people I could talk to. I guess I carved out a bit of a niche for myself for being the tech guy who is very, very interested in economics and the way that banks really, really worked and operated. And just as an example of that, I spent all my lunch times kind of taking out the traders on the trading floor, asking them how things work, asking them, what their opinion was of certain things in the economy, about the financial crisis. And all of a sudden, Bitcoin came about as a topic of discussion one day. 2 or 3 of my colleagues that week, knowing that my interests were both technology and economics, they approached me and said to me, Joe, what do you think of this thing that people are talking about? It's called Bitcoin. Said to those guys, to be honest, I've not actually heard of it before, but if you send me a link to the articles you've been reading, then I'll gladly look it up and tell you my opinion. And that was one of Wired magazine's very first articles on Bitcoin.
Okay, cool.
And similar to one of my buddies in the industry, Roger Ver, I shared a similar story where, in that first week where I discovered it, I just barely slept, and I just read everything I could about it. And yeah, it just fueled an initial fascination into the technology because I thought the concept in itself was absolutely beautiful. Fast forward, I guess a year or two later, I dabbled in a lot of Bitcoin trading, and I famously wrote a couple of arbitrage bots that turned a $100 initial investment into $200,000. And that formed, I guess, the basis for BTC.sx as an investment. I said to myself at the time, after literally the week after buying my first Bitcoins, I asked myself, what do I want to do with these Bitcoins? And to that, I had two answers. First of all, I wanted to trade them. Second of all, I wanted to save them. And that pretty much brings us up to speed to where we are today. BTC.sx was set up as a trading platform built by a trader for traders. And Magnr, which we've just launched today, I'm very proud to announce, provides essentially the world's first interest-bearing Bitcoin savings accounts.
That's really awesome. That's, it's cool to hear. A lot of people have those stories where they hear about it and then they just want to know every little detail about it, about Bitcoin. And I'm glad you did that, and I'm glad it's taken you to develop these kind of tools and things for people to use. So I guess then, yeah, we can start with Magnr. Can you tell us how it works, what it does?
So the way that Magnr operates is in a very transparent fashion. We allow users to sign up very simply and very easily onto the site once they have an account and login. That is simply displayed with two options, essentially to deposit or to withdraw their funds. And so when we were looking into building the service, we thought, we need to build a service which is very familiar and very friendly to what people are used to in the current banking world. And so we created a function that was just essentially looks and feels like a standard savings account that allows you to deposit Bitcoins, but with a key differentiator of the user being able to check on blockchain every single transaction that has gone on in his account, which I think is a really beautiful concept. And so once you sign up, you can deposit funds into your account. Once you've deposited funds into your account, all you have to do is essentially just sit back and relax and watch interest build up in your account month on month.
Where does the money that you're paying the interest come from, and can you explain that for us?
Sure. So initially, Magnr is not going to be a revenue-generating product. The way that we generate money on BTC.sx is by charging essentially brokerage fees and a daily interest fee. So essentially, the money that we earn on BTC.sx as a trading platform is what's used to pay the interest on Magnr.
Okay.
What's your going interest rate?
So we've launched with a promotional rate of 2.18% per annum, and that's annual equivalent rate, and that will be honored through to the end of 2050.
Okay, so then do you adjust that manually every year, or does it have any automatic adjustments?
Sure. So after the promotional rate, we're going to switch to a variable rate of interest, and that will be the rate of interest will very much vary upon the demand on leveraged funds on our trading platform.
Okay, cool.
What kind of security measures do you have in place? And if you could tell us if there's any particular reason why people should trust you over any other Bitcoin banking system, or just any place else to save their money.
Sure. So I guess when you compare it to the traditional banking system, what really, really gets me excited is, the amount of accountability we can show publicly. And I guess we can't carry on this podcast or conversation without at least once mentioning the benefits of the blockchain, and especially for those who, for those listeners who aren't coming from a Bitcoin/blockchain background, but perhaps are coming from a background of finance. The best analogy to draw is, for the first time in the history of the world, and this is what I'm really excited about, once you deposit your money, you can see on a public ledger that your deposit has been made. And you can trace that through to any point in time in the future because it's an immutable record. I can't remember the last time I made a deposit in a savings account in my fiat bank, but what I do know is that once I deposit that money, I have zero visibility as to what the bank does to it whatsoever. Yeah. And I think that's just a beautiful concept to be able to say we've built.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've been in Bitcoin for, I don't know, a couple years now, and I've had my own wallets, and obviously I can see the addresses on the blockchain and stuff. But actually, just within the past few months, I started using a third-party service where I deposit money, but it's not like, I used to use Coinbase, and they don't really keep the money in the address that you send it to. But with this new service, they do keep the money in the address that I send it to. And so I do love that. It's something I love to be able to see. This is yes, I'm sending money to a third party. That's fine. But this is my address. I can see that my money's there anytime. I don't have full control over it because I'm asking them to help me do stuff with it, but I do like at least knowing if it's there and being able to see if it disappears. So that's a really great thing to have.
Sure. I mean, one of the reason why we control the address is that funds may at some point be deployed throughout different parts of the site. However, we will still give full visibility to our clients and publicly as well, and we'll stand by that accountability that the public ledger gives everybody. And, I think that's a great way of operating because, if something does go wrong, we are absolutely fully accountable of that. And, everything is on public record and very visibly on public record as to where the funds are at any point in time.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I guess while we're on the blockchain, I should ask, I saw that one of your, description about you said that the interest payout is calculated from blockchain data. Can you tell us how that works?
So that's a pretty innovative experience in itself, and it's actually one that we've been consulting larger financial institutions on. Because when we told them that we were doing this, the first question I asked was, how do you dare do this? And the answer is actually very, very simple. So if you say, for example, you deposit, say, 1 Bitcoin on 1st of January on the blockchain, you have that blockchain address, and that essentially belongs to you and your Magnr account. What's beautiful for us is that, we don't have to look at our internal database records to check that you've paid 1 Bitcoin to this address on this date. We simply have a record of this address belonging to you as our client. And all we do is we literally look up the blockchain record for when deposits have been made, if they have been made, what the current balance is, if there have been any withdrawals in the meantime on our private database. And we essentially marry those two records up and we can produce essentially live what the interest you're owed.
Okay, sweet. And that's paid at the end of each month? It gets added to the same addresses?
Yes, so that's paid on a monthly basis. So internally, for now, we'll just pay them on our database, but on withdrawal, it will be honored in full. We're considering a couple of options whereby we pay it on blockchain as well, but watch this space on that front.
Joe, if worst case scenario, something happens that people are losing money, what kind of, I guess just more as a general question, what kind of, in your space, what do you normally see people doing to, like if your business is holding the money and keeping it safe, what do you do worst case scenario once you've lost that money? Do you guys have funds on the side to pay back your investors, not your investors, but people saving money? What do you do in that situation?
So I guess first of all, I just want to clarify that we'll only put our private funds at risk on BTC.sx. On Magnr, we need the ability to be able to move the funds to show accountability of those funds. However, in terms of safety and security, the great innovation behind multi-sig hierarchical wallets is that when we worked with our wallet service provider BitGo, they essentially enable us to run independent of the security of our clients' funds. And what that means is, if we go down as a business, they can still control the funds that are in the account. And so we can still work with them to honor every single account payout that we owe. So creating the business in a structure which allows us to still remain accountable if the worst was to happen for us is a very important part of our business model. And it's how we've operated from day one. with BTC.sx client funds as well.
So here's something interesting. This is changing gears a little bit, but we call ourselves a Bitcoin and Liberty podcast. And so we talk about, with our Liberty ideas, we like to talk about regulation and make fun of that and stuff. Can you tell us what that has been like for you? Has there been a lot of regulation? Have you had to comply a lot? Has there been anything that's just been way too much regulation? I mean, we wouldn't agree with you, but is there anywhere that you see that you think needs more regulation? And just how has that been for you?
So, I mean, I generally am in favor of a very light touch regulatory approach. And when you ask yourself what regulators are for, I can understand why they want to regulate the space, because they want to essentially ensure the safety of any business that controls client money. And I'd have to absolutely agree with their remit that, it should be a priority that, businesses should be regulated in a way that they can be accountable for protecting their clients' money. However, I'm in favor of a very light approach whereby you can help nurture businesses through helpful regulation. However, being overbearing and certain things in the New York license, I have to say I do disagree with. Where it is overbearing, where it does collect unnecessary data, I'm generally not in favor of that approach. However, I am still in favor of light touch regulation, whereby people in the general public are protected against malicious bad actors in the space, and of which we've seen quite a lot of.
Have you had to deal with regulation yourself? I mean, do you have to do KYC or anything like that?
So from a perspective of our business, BTC.sx, we've built certain rails to be able to collect data. To date, we don't yet enforce it. And to answer your question about working with regulators, we always take a stance of being very open to communicating with them. And so what that means for us on a practical level is that we'll reach out to them and we'll explain our stance from the Bitcoin business perspective and what our thoughts are as to where the regulation should go or if it should go ahead, etc. And so recently when HMRC in the UK placed a call for information, we were very quick to respond with our thoughts into, the growing and the nurturing of this very innovative space. And they've generally been fairly positive in England, which many people have been surprised about. But when you look at the economic benefits of, nurturing very innovative startups such as Bitcoin or blockchain-based startups, then it's a no-brainer that they should get involved. Governments should get involved, and governments should take a relatively positive stance on the innovation that it could bring. And the UK so far has done that.
Okay, what we like to do normally, we ask any guests that we have a personal question. So this could be, really anything. We like to keep it related to Bitcoin, but it could be anything related from your favorite memory, a way that you've seen it so that you can see it change the world, or it could be a hacking story, or how you got scammed one time. Just an interesting story is what we're looking for.
Yeah, I guess I know I said there'd be no surprises, but I forgot. Yeah, this is one.
The one surprise.
This is one that we just like to do at the end, just for fun. Just some kind of really cool, a funny story, whatever you like.
Oh, sure, a free reign essentially.
yeah, definitely.
I guess I'd like to keep it somewhat relevant. The one thing that I always get asked about the most of all, regardless of what I've done in this space, is how I turned my $100 initial investment into Bitcoin into $200,000. And so I got to say at this stage, part of that was a natural price rise from when I bought my first Bitcoins at $2 a piece. However, I guess the common theme there is just to keep on learning. So I read every single book that I could find on trading and trading algorithms. Second to that, I took every opportunity I could to leverage my contacts in the banking space and kind of pick their brains as to how trading works, how settlement works, how you place an order out to market. And I just went home and copied that in my own free time. And so the first scripts I wrote were to arbitrage the markets. And so new markets that are setting up now, especially the emerging markets such as Kenya. If there's not many people selling Bitcoins there, there's going to be a price disparity. So my advice to that would be buy it off the cheap markets, sell it on the more illiquid markets, and you're bound to make a profit very easily whilst doing them a favor of bringing Bitcoins from a very liquid country into a very illiquid country. Second to that, if you're still interested in trading but not quite arbitrage, I'd highly recommend looking into technical analysis. Slightly more risky approach, but I very successfully traded $20,000 at that time into 200,000 using just a very simple moving average trading indicator. And yeah, I guess if people wanted to know a bit more about that, then that's my 2 cents of the day.
That's awesome. I actually, $100 was my first investment too, and I was scared to death because $100 meant a lot to me back then. But I'm nowhere near 200 grand, but I'll get there someday.
But don't forget, a lot of my 200 grand went back into investing into the Bitcoin as an ecosystem. So, rebuilding the financial system from ground up is very much part of my remit. And, very keen to be involved, really. Anywhere where we can take power away from, the institutional banks and into the pockets of people, I'm all for.
Absolutely. I love that. I also was reading that on the description and how the millennials don't trust banks at all, and we're trying to help that. So I'm all for that, definitely. So cool. Well, this was a lot of fun. I want to thank you for joining us. And before we let you go, can you just share just once more your websites, if you want to share a Twitter handle, email address, any way that people could connect with you, reach out, contact, anything like that?
Sure. So Magnr.com was launched today. You can find it at www.magnr.com. Follow us on Twitter at Hello Magnr. And we're essentially offering the world's first Bitcoin interest-bearing savings account in a very safe, controlled, and trusted manner.
Wonderful. Well, thanks a lot again. This was Joe Lee from BTC.sx and Magnr. Thanks again.
Daniel,
Thank you, Joe.
Tim, thanks for having me on the show. Cheers.
Join the club, join the club, join the Bitcoin Talk Club.
A new forum sensation is coming to a computer near you. A site that adapts to its users and tailors to altcoins. Are you a coin developer looking for a home? Look no further than the club. Have your own section and moderate it yourself. They're looking for members to help build the club into a one-stop resource for everyone's needs. They're looking for you at bitcointalk.club.
Join the club, join the club, join the Bitcoin Talk Club.
Hey everybody, you just heard, I guess hopefully, heard an interview, and now we're going to finish off this episode with an article. This is from Wired.com with a somewhat sensational headline: how the tech behind Bitcoin could stop the next Snowden. So just as an overview, before we get into it and really talk about it, the main idea I think is that governments, and I guess particularly the United States government, is looking into how blockchain could be used to monitor their data and basically make sure that it's a lot harder for things to get leaked or to get tampered with.
Yeah, basically what it looks like, and we've seen this before with the blockchain and everything, where people put data into the blockchain just in order to have it stored there so you can see it, or even just putting the hash into the blockchain so that you can verify it later. And I mean, this is pretty similar, but it's a private blockchain, and the government, the NSA or whoever could run it themselves. I think that's all. Just, it's not the actual Bitcoin blockchain, but they can have their own version and verify their own data.
Yeah. So, I don't know. What do you think about it?
I guess it is interesting because it's like, I mean, you almost knew that this had to be coming, right? I mean, if we gain technology, no matter how good it is, the state is going to have it and they're going to be able to use it too, right? I mean, it goes both ways. And so it is tough. I mean, because I think you would agree. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we would agree that Snowden's revelations were a good thing, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And obviously he survived, and he's in Russia now, I think, because he didn't get caught right away. That's pretty simple. And theoretically, this kind of system would have gotten him caught. What happened is he was a system administrator, and this is a huge topic in computer security, and I'm not an expert at all, but I mean, he just had full control of the system. That's what a system administrator can do. They can change any file, they can give permissions to anybody. So he was able, just because he was a high enough position and people trusted him, he was able to get this data that the government did not want to get out, and he was able to copy it, save it, and then cover his tracks. There are log files, but he was able to overwrite the log files. I mean, that's pretty simple, right? He just had full access to the computer, and so he covered his tracks. It's that simple. And what they're saying is you could, if the NSA had a blockchain, they could store the hash of the data in the blockchain, and they could see later on down the road if it's been changed. Just like with a Bitcoin transaction, when that's exactly what Bitcoin does, really. It's a permanent and immutable ledger, distributed too. And so, I mean, every transaction, once it's there, you cannot undo it. And this is just a fascinating thing, and it's weird to think that this is even possible, but that's the whole glory of the blockchain, is that it can do this kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the government could do it too, and it's tough because obviously we don't want people like Snowden to be harassed for doing stuff like this. But it's interesting. I mean, they're going to do it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Like you said, and like we were just talking about earlier, it just makes sense that when you have something like this and it's open source or whatever, and even if it's not open source, I feel like eventually things like this get out. Right. I don't know. I'd be interested to see how exactly it works. The thing about not being able to tamper with files, that could be a good thing no matter who's using it, because Snowden didn't really tamper with anything as far as like changing the actual data. It's more just that he copied it and sent it out. And what they're saying is that because the blockchain would be the log, it'd be impossible for him to cover his tracks.
Right.
So I guess if you look at it that way, this doesn't really make doing what he did impossible. I just think you get caught a lot quicker, and maybe the price is a lot higher for the person willing to do this than it was for him. Not that he hasn't paid a pretty large price for it, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the interesting things is, like, theoretically, you could still override the system, but then you would have to have a 51% attack. I mean, it's a blockchain. If you want to change it, you got to do a 51% attack. And in that situation, it just depends on... I mean, with the Bitcoin network, that's hard to do. With a private government-run network with a whole lot less hashing power behind it, right? Maybe that could be easier. I don't know.
Well, do you think what I was saying was right there, that somebody could still let out this data without having to actually change anything? There would just be a record of it?
Yeah, I think... I mean, if somebody has to have access to the data, right? And having access to it doesn't mean that you have to change it.
Or that you have to change anything in the blockchain.
Well, I think what it would do is it would... I mean, again, it just depends on how the system works. But I think it would just... As soon as you access the file, it logs that access in the blockchain. So yes, then anybody could see that you accessed it, and you would have a really hard time changing that. And even if you did change it, just like with Bitcoin, if there was a 51% attack, people would notice.
Yeah.
They would see blocks being erased and transactions getting messed up and stuff like that. So theoretically, it should work pretty well. And in terms of the access being recorded, and I think you're right. He could still release it. It would just be more dangerous, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess it's worth mentioning the system, this blockchain data protection system, is called Black Lantern, and it's created by an Estonian company called Guard Time.
Yeah. I mean, I think another thing we talked about before, and I mentioned to you before we started recording, how in the article they mentioned that a system like this makes provisions for internal attacks as much as external attacks. And we've talked about that. We talked about that with the Silk Road and other things like that.
Wait, I know what you mean, but what have we talked about before?
We talked about, well, I started off, I guess I didn't really make the connection as well as I should have. We've talked about how the thing about having something like Bitcoin or just these decentralized things and public ledgers and everything, they basically take humans out of the equation, and it's not that they're
okay.
So like, I don't know, it prevents people from being corrupt, I guess. Which in a situation like Snowden, he was corrupt in the context of the place where he worked.
Exactly.
In the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't say that what he did was corrupt, but like within that system, he was going against the rules. So, I mean, yeah, it's like we were saying earlier. This is amazing because it allows things to be done without human tampering in them.
Yeah, I guess
that can be
in that
used
episode
for evil, though, I guess.
Right. I remember in that episode, towards the end, I came to the question, like, well, if even the fairly good guys like Ross Ulbricht or whoever DPR was at that time, if even he can do stupid things and ask for an ID and keep that on record and everything, if even the good guys are like that, where's the hope? What can we do to protect against failures like that? And we said decentralization, and that's basically what this enables. If you set up, and they even mentioned in the article, distributed autonomous corporations. If you could set up the Silk Road with technology like this, where everybody can see what's there, what's being stored, what's being changed, and when, that's huge, because then people theoretically could see, he's trying to store my ID. Yeah, I'm not cool with that. Or, okay, I'll let him store my ID, but maybe this sort of system could convey that it's not stored securely. It's stored on his laptop instead of in some offline encrypted storage. So, I mean, those are difficult things. Maybe they wouldn't work with this exact system just because how the heck do you know where the ID is stored? I don't know. But that it's still related. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that this technology is pushing us towards, where everybody that's in charge can be watched. Everything that's part of a certain corporation can be watched and managed by anybody out there. It's autonomous. It works itself, and everybody that's part of it kind of has equal footing.
Yeah. So I guess I'm kind of like struggling with how to explain what makes it problematic when it gets used for something like this. I guess that it's not public if the government was using this, because if there was something like this that was keeping track of all the government's records and everybody had access to it, that would be awesome, because not only would it show people like Snowden, but it would also show other people who are actually corrupt, who are maybe tampering with things. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So,
like, just shady politicians.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I agree.
Or shady government employees.
Okay.
So, but, I mean, that's good. But, again, the way I understand that this is working is it's only basically people within the government can use this. So it's not something where like
Right.
you and I could go on there and check to see. And I guess that's where the
Exactly, yeah.
issue comes in with the government using this, because it's not that they shouldn't be allowed to use it. I just guess I don't really like it.
Right. It's similar to, I mean, this episode will air on a Thursday, and we did a live show on Wednesday, and we talked about how the banks are getting blockchain technology, and basically it's becoming easier and easier to use fiat currency on the blockchain or on a blockchain, because banks are using it and stuff. And basically it's like what I said at the beginning, I mean, just a few minutes ago. The technology is going to be there, and anybody's going to be able to use it, even if it is the banks, the corrupt banks, and the fiat currency and the Federal Reserve and stuff. That's all going to be there, and if the blockchain is that helpful, then they're going to use it too. And I mean, it is rough that happens, that the bad things like fiat currency are improving, I guess.
It's
that was a weird thing to say. I mean, is it really improving, or is it?
I mean, I think it's improving. Yeah. Not that makes it awesome or anything, but it is improving.
Yeah. But is it a bad thing?
It's a really weird thing.
Yeah, this works for both situations. I mean, the banks using the blockchain and the government using blockchains to verify data. Is it bad? That's a tough question, because it is technology. It does make them more powerful and let them do more things, but it's also decentralized, although not exactly. So I guess like you said, we're not going to have access to these kinds of systems. So in that sense, it's bad. It's really bad if they can do all this stuff without us knowing about it. In a conceptual way, if it really was decentralized, that would be pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a really weird dilemma.
I know, yeah.
I guess it's just the price that you have to pay for something like this, like such a big idea that has so many applications.
Yeah, and ultimately, I guess here's the thing. The government is going to run this stuff, but they're going to run it centralized. We're going to run this stuff, and we're going to make decentralized autonomous corporations. If we both use the technology, if they do it centralized and we do it decentralized, at the end of the day, I mean, it'll take a while because we have a lot to overcome. The state is extremely powerful. But at the end of the day, in a battle of centralized technology versus decentralized technology, I mean, decentralized has got to take it, I think. I mean, it'll be rough. It'll take a while, and it'll cost a lot, and we might never see it in our lifetime, but it seems like it would trend in that direction.
Yeah, I guess, like, if you want to find hope in it, you just have to believe that it benefits us more than it benefits them, even if there are benefits on both sides. And that's like going back to the Silk Road thing. Where's the hope? If you're gonna have hope, I guess that's it. I don't know if I believe it or not, but
yeah, I guess that's pretty good. I mean, with the Silk Road, I mean, the Silk Road itself, even when it was run by one DPR, it's still better than the government, right? I mean, it's better run, better managed, and there are better ideas behind it and stuff. So I guess that's actually, I mean, yes, they got caught, and I guess that was part of the question. Well, where's the hope for not getting caught and not getting shut down? So not everything's solved, but it is good to remember that, well, they did okay. You know, they lasted a while. They served a ton of customers and stuff. That's good, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so they're saying at the end, while it could be used by governments to protect its secrets, it could just as easily be used as a tool to keep the government accountable.
Right.
And they're saying using guard time in government could, in theory, give all citizens a copy of a blockchain that records changes. Yeah, so, like, that's true, but I doubt that any government would ever do that.
Yeah, I doubt that, too. They even mentioned, though, a blockchain that records changes to email log files. It wouldn't stop a political leader from deleting important email, and it wouldn't place the contents of the email or even the metadata in the ledger. But it would alert auditors and investigators to changes. I think that's a pretty clear reference to Hillary Clinton, because she did whatever the heck she did with her email, and this would help us keep an eye on that.
I guess
stuff,
this article came out about the same time as that stuff, I think.
Yeah. I don't really follow that. I don't know anything. I just kind of heard that it happened.
I didn't either. But yeah, the last sentence of this article, convincing any government agency to implement such a radical safeguard, however, is another matter. I think that pretty much sums it up.
Thanks for listening to episode 77. All of the music in today's show was from John Stuart. Remember to check out this week's show notes at YMB and BTC.com and leave us a comment. We'll see you live next Wednesday and for another regular show on Thursday.